Hey, friend, welcome back to She Said podcast. I'm your host, Laura Cox Kaplan, and I'm really glad to have you here with me today. So I want you to think about this moment where we are right now. And if you're listening to this episode in early November, as I'm recording it, you're likely in this really interesting sort of moment. The leaves are changing or have already changed, depending upon where you may live. Halloween has just happened, but maybe you're still navigating your way through candy wrappers all over the house. Or if you're anything like me, you're probably trying to get rid of all that candy as quickly as possible so that you're not tempted. But here's what else is true. You can probably hear that steady drumbeat as we approach the holiday season. Instagram is already filled with holiday music and decorations, whether we like it or not. And it is a glaring reminder of all the celebrations that are coming, and with them, all the planning that's probably on your plate and mine. The double-sided multi-page to-do and shopping list, the calendar invites that start to pile up, the group texts about whose house for Thanksgiving and who's bringing what, and Hanukkah and Christmas, and the cards, and the outfits needed for the photo that you need for the cards, and when the cards have to be ordered to get them in the mail, and the mental load of gifts and travel and traditions and expectations and all the tiny decisions that somehow start to feel enormous when you are making your 100th or 1,000th of these little decisions. These first few days in November, to me, always feel a little like the calm before the storm. I kind of think of it as that tiny window of time before everything begins to accelerate. It's that window before we're pulled in a million different directions and before every day becomes maybe a series of trade-offs. This event or that one, this tradition or that one, time for yourself or time for everyone else. One of the shifts that I started making a few years ago revolves around a question that I ask myself around this time of year. How do I want to move through the next 2 months? Not how I think I should move through them, but how do I actually want to show up for the people and the projects that matter most to me? I think we all have roles that we've probably inherited, sometimes from our families, sometimes from our partners, sometimes from ourselves, maybe 5 or 10 years ago or in a different season when our lives look completely different. And we keep playing those roles year after year without ever asking ourselves, is this still mine to carry? Is this still something that I should be doing? And sometimes, if we're lucky, or maybe unlucky, depending upon how you look at it, we get a wake-up call that forces us to see what we've been doing and how we've been doing it. Now, my wake-up call came a few years ago when one of my children, who was really young at the time, said something that absolutely stopped me. We were talking about all the holidays coming up, and we were planning for Thanksgiving and Hanukkah and Christmas and both my kids' birthdays and a visit from my parents and a trip squeezed in. And one of my kids offered up, maybe we should just skip the presents this year. The holidays make mommy so unhappy. Ugh, right? Now, she wasn't really serious. She didn't really mean she didn't want us to have presents. But what it meant was I had to sit with the fact that my child had actually noticed. She had noticed that the stress and overwhelm that I thought I was managing, and the way that I was pushing through for everyone else's sake, it wasn't actually hidden. It wasn't hidden at all. My kids could see it, and more than that, they were actually feeling it and apparently internalizing it, which is fairly horrifying for me. The very people that I thought I was doing all of this work for weren't feeling the love. They were actually feeling all the stress that I was transmitting in every direction. This was not, as you might have guessed, one of my finer moments. But it also was one that got my attention. And more than that, It was that wake-up call that made me realize that my internalizing that stress was making the holidays less magical and less joyful for everyone. It was a time when my kids should be enjoying spending time with their mother, but she was too unhappy with the overwhelm of all the things that she had to get done during the holidays. This was my moment. That was when I realized that I had to do something radically different. Because I wasn't just carrying obligations and roles that were draining me, I was also modeling for my children that this is what the holidays look like, that this is what showing up for people you love looks like. Oh, and I did not want my stress and my reactions to be the way that they looked at the holidays and essentially their inheritance. So I stopped and I asked myself some really hard questions. What if I stopped doing things the way I'd always done them? What if I let go of some traditions that were draining me? What if I said no to obligations that didn't actually create joy for anyone? What if I focused on what would actually make this season more meaningful for me and for my family? And those questions led me to a word that has become one of my guiding principles for the holidays and really for navigating any season of competing demands. And the word is equipoise. Now, it's a word you don't hear every day, I'll grant you that, but it's one that, as I reflected on this particular moment in time, I thought it hit really so many of us right where we are, where we're balancing competing demands for our attention, our time, and our mental energy. Now, equipoise does, in fact, mean balance, but it's more specific than that. It's actually about counterbalance, equal distribution of weight, a state of equilibrium that is active and intentional, not passive. It's not about standing perfectly still. It's about making constant, subtle adjustments to stay centered, even when everything around you, like the holidays, are in motion. And isn't that just the most perfect description of where so many of us find ourselves during the holidays? Now, of course, I'm not just going to share that observation, as compelling as I think it might be. I'm also going to share with you a set of questions that I have found really helpful and that I think might be helpful to you too. But before we dive into those, I want to connect this idea of equipoise to an important 5-part framework for well-being, something that frankly might sound a bit academic, but is actually really practical. The field of positive psychology centers on a 5-part framework that contributes to human well-being and flourishing. And the 5 parts are positive emotions, engagement, relationships or connections, meaning, and achievement. The acronym for those 5 things is PERMA for short. And here's what's really fascinating. When you're centered and balanced, when you have that equipoise, you're actually better positioned to experience all 5 of these elements. You have more capacity for positive emotion because you're not constantly stressed. You can be more engaged and present because you're not distracted by overwhelm. Your relationships are stronger because you're showing up as yourself, not as an exhausted version of yourself. You're connected to meaning because you're making choices that are actually aligned with your values and what's most important to you and to the people that you care about. And you can actually achieve what matters because you're not scattered across 100 competing priorities. But here's the other piece that I don't think we talk about enough. That balance, your equipoise, directly impacts your influence. When you're pulled in a million directions, when you're saying yes to everything, when you're running on empty, you might be busy, but you're not influential, or at least you're probably less influential than you could be. Real influence comes from clarity. It comes from presence, from being able to show up fully in those moments that matter, from making decisions that reflect who you are and what you value, not just reacting to whoever's asking the most or the loudest. Think about the leaders that you most admire, the ones who have real influence. They're not the ones who are frantically doing everything. They're the ones who are centered, who are clear on their priorities, who have the mental and emotional space to be strategic, to be thoughtful, and to be genuinely present. So, finding your equipoise during the holidays isn't just about feeling better, although that's certainly important. It's about being more effective, more present, more influential in your own life and in the lives of the people who matter to you. So today I want to share 5 questions that you can ask yourself for finding and keeping your equipoise during what can often feel like the most wonderful and the most overwhelming time of the year. These aren't just survival questions. They're ways to actually help you enjoy this season and at the same time to stay connected to yourself and to the people that you love, and to help you make choices that will feel really good in January, not just in the moment. And we're talking about all of these now because, frankly, a bit of planning is often one of the most important things that we can do to not just manage the chaos, but as a gift to our future selves. These are questions that I'm going to share that I have developed based on my study and work in the area of positive psychology, but also based on practices that I've created to help myself navigate all the competing demands, especially during the holidays. I turn to these questions when I start to feel that things are maybe tilting too far in one direction or another, when I feel like I'm starting to lose my balance and I need to recalibrate. I find these helpful, and I hope you will too. Now, before we dive in, I do have 3 terrific collaboration partners who are sharing some great discounts that you can take advantage of during the holidays, and they are just for She Said podcast listeners. So be sure to check out the show notes for promo codes that will help you get a jump on your holiday shopping. The offer from Cozy Earth in particular actually gives you a full 41% off of your purchase. You'll get 20% off from Eric Javits, who has the most amazing winter hats, also summer ones too, if you're headed off to somewhere warm, and ESOC, ESSOC, for some of the best no-show, no-slip socks for everyone on your list. So, friend, taking advantage of these special offers is a great way to support this show and also to get some nice things checked off your shopping list before the holidays. With that, let's dive into the holiday survival questions. Okay, friend, here's the thing about the holidays. Everything feels important. Everything feels like it matters. And because of that, we tend to end up saying yes to things that we don't actually want to do, and maybe no to things that we do want to do. And then we feel resentful and exhausted, and we sometimes can't quite figure out why. So instead of making decisions in the moment based on guilt or obligation or maybe whoever asked first or loudest or most, I want to share a framework with you, a way to evaluate your trade-offs that can connect directly to what actually creates more well-being and flourishing for you in your life. Now, remember those 5 elements of well-being that I mentioned earlier? Positive emotion, engagement, relationships or connections, meaning, and achievement, or PERMA for short. Well, what if we used those as our decision-making filter? When you're facing a decision, any decision really, big or small, you can ask yourself these 5 questions that I'm going to share. And here's the key. You don't need a yes to all 5, but if you're getting mostly no's, that tells you something. These questions have the added benefit of boosting your self-awareness in those moments when it can be really hard to tune out the noise. So here's the first question. Ask yourself, will this opportunity, this party, or this event create positive emotion for me or someone I love or care about? This question is about joy, satisfaction, gratitude, contentment. Not every obligation is going to light you up, But ask yourself, does this opportunity create positive feelings somewhere in the equation? If, for example, you're dreading attending your nephew's holiday school concert, ask yourself, will my presence create positive emotion for him? Will seeing his little face light up when he spots me in the audience bring me joy, even if sitting through the concert itself probably doesn't? It's probably a yes. But if you're agreeing to host a party that you don't want to host for people that maybe you don't particularly enjoy, and no one will be genuinely happy about it, including you, well, maybe that's information worth paying attention to. Most things, honestly, are not quite so clear-cut, but you get the idea. Question 2. Ask yourself, will this opportunity allow me to be present and engaged? Engagement is about being fully absorbed in what you're doing. It's that feeling of flow where time disappears and you're completely present. Now, some holiday obligations actively prevent engagement. You're there, but you're mentally making your grocery list or counting down the minutes until you can go home. But some create space for real presence. Decorating cookies with your kids, for example, where you're actually laughing and making a mess together and just enjoying each other's company. Maybe a conversation with an old friend where you both lose track of time. If an obligation is going to leave you scattered and distracted and checking your phone and thinking about all the other places you should be, it might be working against your well-being. But if it creates space for you to be genuinely present, even if it's inconvenient, that might be worth protecting. Question 3. Does this opportunity, event, party, whatever, does this build or deepen a relationship that matters to me? Now, this is the question that helps us distinguish between performing for others and showing up for people who we genuinely care about. Maybe it's your mom's request that you come to help her decorate for the holidays. Now, that's relationship building time, those side-by-side moments that help create connection. Maybe it's your friend's holiday party where you won't know anyone. If it's a friend that matters to you, showing up matters to them. And that's a relational yes, even if it's not your perfect idea of fun. But the networking event where you're making small talk with people you'll never see again, the committee that maybe sounds impressive but doesn't deepen any real connection, those are less about relationship investments, and they may be more about performances. But here's the nuance. Some things don't energize us, but they do build relationships that matter. Now, that's often exactly where we need to show up. The key is knowing the difference between showing up for someone you love and performing for people whose opinions don't actually matter to you. Now, question 4. Ask yourself, does this opportunity connect to what gives my life meaning? Meaning is about purpose, about being connected to something that is larger than you. It's about your values and what you want your life to be about. If family connection is a core value for you, then yes, traveling for Thanksgiving, even when it's exhausting, connects to meaning. If creativity matters to you, then making time for that handmade gift project might fuel and feed your soul, even though it's more work than clicking add to cart. If generosity and service are important to you, then volunteering at a shelter might be exactly where you need to be. But if you're doing something because it looks good, because you think you should, because it's what everyone else expects, and it's not connected to what actually gives your life meaning, that's a signal. So get clear on what you actually care about, not what you think you should care about. Name it, write it down, and then let that guide you and be really intentional about this. I'm not saying you won't still have to do things that, look good or that you have to show up for other people, but just being clear on which ones really contribute to meaning for you is very important. And then question 5, does this opportunity contribute to an achievement or a goal that matters to me? Achievement isn't just about professional accomplishments. It's about making progress on things that matter to you, finishing a project, mastering a new skill, creating something, following through on a commitment. Now, sometimes we say yes to things that actively undermine our real goals. You want to finish writing that proposal, but you agree to chair the holiday party planning committee. You're trying to establish a consistent exercise practice, but you book yourself for breakfast meetings every morning in December. So ask yourself, is this activity helping me make progress on something that I actually care about accomplishing? Or is it just filling time and creating the illusion of productivity while actually keeping me from what really matters? And here, friend, is the important part. Sometimes the achievement is relational. I want to be the kind of parent who shows up, or I want to be the kind of friend that people can count on. Those are also achievements too. So this question works actually in tandem with the relationship question. Now, here's what I've discovered about this framework with these questions that might be the most valuable part. The benefit isn't just in the answers themselves. It's actually in giving yourself the space to reflect on these questions in the first place. Because here's what happens. When you take even 2 minutes to work through these questions, you often discover that something you're dreading, maybe something that felt like pure obligation to you, actually has real value that you hadn't even fully recognized. And that recognition changes everything. Maybe you're resenting having to drive 2 hours for your sister's holiday party. But when you pause and you ask these questions to yourself, you realize this experience deepens a relationship that really matters to me. This connects to your value of family. Your sister will feel loved and supported by your presence. And when you reconnect with those positive elements, when you can name them clearly, that drive suddenly feels less draining. You're not white-knuckling your way through an obligation anymore. You're actually showing up with intention and awareness for why it matters. Now, friend, you already know this, but sometimes we have to show up whether we really want to or not. And so if we can turn those times into something more valuable and more emotionally fulfilling versus draining, all the better. The reflection itself actually reframes the experience. It can transform what might have been resentment into purpose. It helps you find the meaning parts even in challenging situations. And when you can identify what you're gaining, the relationship, the meaning, the positive emotion you're creating for someone else, you show up differently. You're more present, less resentful, more likely to actually enjoy moments within the experience because you're not fighting against it the whole time. So even when the answer is, yes, I need to do this thing that will drain me, the reflection process makes it less draining because you understand why you're doing it and what value it creates both for others and for yourself. And that awareness can give you the insight that you'll need to build in some valuable recovery time to restore your energy after an experience that leaves you drained. That is the power of this framework and these questions. It's not just a decision-making tool. It's actually a reframing tool. It helps you show up to the things you choose to do with clarity and intention instead of resentment and exhaustion. Let me give you a real example of how this framework works. And this is important because it's not always about choosing between something terrible and something wonderful. Those tend to be easier choices, frankly. Often we're choosing between two genuinely good options. And that is where I find this framework to become incredibly valuable. A few years ago, I got invited to serve on a holiday fundraising committee for an organization that was doing really meaningful work and a cause that I genuinely care about. The committee included some impressive people, and I knew I could probably contribute. At the same time, some close friends had been asking me to commit to monthly dinners. These were women who I love but rarely saw because we're all so busy. Both required the same time commitment, one evening a month from November through March. And I couldn't do both because I was already fairly committed. So I ran both of these opportunities through this framework. The committee, it checked the boxes for positive emotion and meaning and achievement, strong on 3, maybe on 4. But the dinners, they actually checked all 5. And they checked some of those boxes even more deeply, especially as it related to relationships and engagement. Those conversations where 2 hours feel like 20 minutes and the kind of deep friendships that I'd been neglecting. When I laid it out this way, the answer actually became really clear. Both were good choices, but one was more aligned with what I actually needed during that particular season. The committee would have been fine, but the dinners were actually essential. So I said no to the committee, and I actually recommended 2 other people who I thought would be great fits, and I said yes to the dinners. And those monthly gatherings became a lifeline. They made me better at everything else I was doing because I was more grounded and less isolated. And by recommending 2 enthusiastic people to take my place on the committee, I probably did the organization an even bigger favor than if I had said yes while I was being stretched too thin. So, friend, that's the framework. 5 questions based on what actually creates well-being and flourishing. Positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement. Now, not every decision needs to check all 5 boxes, but if you're facing a choice and it fails on all 5, that's probably your answer. And if something checks just 1 or 2, but they're the really deep ones, the ones that you really need, relationships and meaning, for example, that might be exactly where you need to show up. So here's my invitation to you. Try these questions this week and over the course of the holiday season. When you're facing a decision about what to say yes or no to, pause for just a couple of minutes and work through them. And pay particularly close attention to what shifts when you give yourself that space to reflect. Because here's what I know. When you're operating from choice rather than obligation, when you're doing what really actually aligns with who you are, you show up differently. You show up more present, more grounded, more like the person that you want to be for yourself and for the people who matter most to you. I don't want either of us to get to January and look back on the holidays with regret. I don't want your kids or mine or anyone you love to remember this season as the time when you were so stressed and unhappy. I want you to look back and feel really good about the choices you made. And that, friend, starts now in early November before all the chaos hits. So here's to finding your equipoise, to making the choices that feel really good, and to staying connected to yourself even when it feels like everyone wants a piece of you. Friend, I'd love to hear from you, so please be sure to send me a message or leave me a comment about how you're using these questions and what you've discovered. As always, thanks for being here, friend. I'll see you next week. I'm Laura Cox Kaplan, and this is She Said, She Said podcast, a weekly production of She Said, She Said Media. Take care.